She knows that wanting to earn a living by playing deadly games is a rare desire, but for her, it's an obsession that goes far beyond the common thought of doing something until you die. She's 17 years old, and in this world of games, her official occupation is death game participant. Lying on the floor, Yuki looks into a mirror only for her reflection to speak on its own, saying, "Oh." Yuki realizes she's in a maid outfit, this time her attention immediately drawn to a massive door down the hall. As the other girls panic about their location, Kinko peeks in from an adjacent room, remarking on how noisy they're being. The fear escalates as one maid wonders if they've been kidnapped, while another simply admits she's scared. While Kinko thinks about calming the crying Momono, Benia is already telling her to stop acting like a child. The group gathers in a dining hall, where Kokuto points out the obvious problem. There are 6 chairs, but only 5 of them. One maid admits she was guided by someone more experienced last time, while Aoi is too flustered to even speak. The 6th person, a girl named Yuki, finally arrives and politely introduces herself to the group. Kinko explains they were all waiting for her, but Yuki just apologizes for being a heavy sleeper, which Kinko finds suspiciously calm. A voice lays out the rules of this death game: escape a mansion full of deadly traps for a massive cash prize, and asks if she's truly aware that her life is on the line. Yuki calmly confirms she understands the stakes, adding that this isn't her first time. Kinko immediately lights up, relieved that they're lucky enough to have a veteran on their team. To build solidarity, Aoi suggests they introduce themselves, and Kinko eagerly agrees to go first. The girl with long pigtails introduces herself as Kinko, explaining this is her first game and she's here to pay off debts. She clarifies her parents' debts, feeling it's her responsibility as a daughter to uphold her father's principle of always returning what you borrow. The next participant, Kokuto, reveals this is her second time playing. Since her last game was 2 years ago, she considers herself a beginner and plans to follow a strong player to win the million-yen prize for her living expenses. Kokuto finishes her introduction by admitting she's only here because normal work is too much effort. After another participant scolds her, the focus shifts to a flustered maid who gets too nervous to speak, prompting the others to let someone else go first. The next girl, Momono, insists she was tricked after being offered an easy job, only to be knocked unconscious and wake up in the mansion. The tension breaks some of the maids, with one crying she just wants to go home for ramen, and another saying she'll forfeit the prize money just to get out alive. Unlike Kinko, Benia clarifies, the debts they're here to pay off are their own, leaving another participant confused. The maid who was too flustered before finally introduces himself, stammering that his name is Akoi, and this is his first game. When asked for his reason, Aoi simply says there's nothing else he can do, leaving the others baffled by his answer. Finally, Yuki introduces herself, revealing she has participated in these death games a total of 28 times. The group is completely floored, and Kinko immediately demands to know how Yuki has survived 28 games and what her ultimate goal is. Kinko presses on asking if Yuki is in debt, but Yuki calmly denies it. Benia then speculates that Yuki must be searching for a dead sister, a theory Yuki immediately shuts down. Benia speculates Yuki is trying to find the masterminds, but after Yuki denies it, Kinko trails off with a sudden realization about her true motive. The memory cuts to a younger Yuki, walking alone under the streetlights at night. A mysterious woman in a suit and sunglasses turns to offer her a cryptic smile while holding a rose, leaving the young Yuki completely baffled. Yuki explains that as she fought through countless violent games, a certain realization dawned on her, leaving her gripping a bloody knife with grim determination. Yuki explains that she finally realized she was just naturally suited for these games. She elaborates that everyone wants to compete where they excel, and for her that just happens to be death games. With that, Yuki reveals her one and only goal: to achieve 99 consecutive wins. Yuki declares that her purpose in life is simply to continue playing these death games. She admits that while she started without a real reason, she is now genuinely proud of her chosen path. Yuki reminds them that she has a bit more experience than everyone else here. Because of that experience, she offers to help them all escape, only to get flustered and trail off mid-sentence. Realizing she said too much, Kinko clarifies this is a cooperative game and they should all try to escape alive. As Kinko points out, they can't stay put. Benia sarcastically asks Miss 28 Wins for her plan, privately thinking she's a weird girl. Taking charge, Kinko declares their first move is to explore the mansion, and the rest of the group follows. As the group explores the mansion, One of the maids tries the handle on a large ornate door. Yuki immediately points out it's the only locked room and tells everyone to start searching for a hidden key. She then lays down the rules for survival. Be a coward, avoid suspicious places, and think twice before making any move. As the group presses forward, Yuki suddenly throws up a hand, commanding everyone to stop. A split second later, a trap activates, sending a dart whistling harmlessly past them. The group reels back in shock from the near-fatal trap. Yuki warns them the mansion is full of deadly traps, explaining that in a place like this, pessimism is a huge advantage. She orders them to be skeptical of everything, expect the worst, and stick close as she takes the lead. Kinko asks how Yuki can possibly know the safe path, only to be startled by her chilling answer, painful experience. Before Kinko can question her further, Yuki suddenly grabs onto her dress, leaving her completely baffled. Yuki explains she was just following the order to stay close, and Kinko tells her there's no need to apologize. As they walk, Kinko notices Yuki and another maid sticking to her like glue and can't help, but think how cute they are. With two maids now clinging to her, a flustered Kinko asks aloud if this is fine as the group presses onward. Observing the scene, Benia remarks that Kinko is quite popular, letting out a thoughtful oho. With Yuki and another maid still clinging to her, Kinko moves into a bedroom to begin the search for the key. The maids immediately start searching the room, checking under the bed covers and behind the curtains. The search proves fruitless, and one of the maids reports that they have checked every room but couldn't find the key. Yuki theorizes the key must be simple to find, since these games focus on death traps, not puzzles, prompting the others to suggest one last search. Just then, a maid with short black hair interrupts, revealing there's still one room they haven't checked. The sudden revelation leaves another maid completely baffled. The maid with short black hair identifies the dining room as the last unchecked area, confirming it's not a designated safe zone. After the search comes up empty, she apologizes for wasting their time, but Kinko reassures her it was a good idea as the maid concludes there's nothing to be found. Suddenly, a plate of snacks appears on the dining table, and one of the maids suggests they take a break. The group gathers around to inspect the unexpected spread of pastries and sweets. As a blonde maid moves to eat a cupcake, another maid stops her in horror, questioning who would dare eat such suspicious food. The dark-haired maid panics, questioning if it's really okay to eat the suspicious cupcake. Ignoring the warning, the blonde maid takes a bite and casually confirms that it's delicious. A voice explains the food is provided in case they get hungry, adding that poison is highly unlikely in this type of game. As Yuki reaches for a snack, the blonde maid confronts him, stating that even in a death game there are lines that should NT be crossed. She accuses Yuki of hiding a secret method to tell which snacks are safe, leaving another maid confused mid-bite. As the blonde maid yells at him, Yuki calmly denies the accusation, insisting he isn't hiding anything. Suddenly, his accuser is violently knocked aside, causing the other maids to cry out in shock. One maid complains that the game feels unbalanced with so many beginners, but another just dismisses her for being too cautious. As she snacks, the maid briefly considers that at least Kokuto has played before, but her thoughts quickly return to the missing key. She suddenly realizes the spread of food itself is a blind spot in their search, prompting a gasp of realization from another maid. The maid who had the epiphany lifts the entire snack tray and bursts out laughing. Sure enough, a set of keys was hidden right underneath, confirming her blind spot theory. She points out they were reaching right past the keys the whole time, leaving the other maid stunned at the clever hiding spot. Just as Kokuto picks up the keys, another maid screams for her to get down, but she only looks up in confusion as a loud bang echoes through the room. The warning comes too late as a projectile slams into Kokuto's arm, sending her and the keys flying just as Kinko shoves another maid clear of a second dart. A projectile slams into Kokuto's shoulder, sending her flying and scattering the keys as Kinko and another maid watch in horror. Kinko stares at the aftermath, where a blood-splattered Aoi and the maid she just saved are left completely bewildered by the attack. As the maids scatter in panic from the sudden ceiling trap, Kinko is frozen in shock over the injured Kokuto. While everyone else rushes to the fallen Kokuto, Yuki coolly observes that this is just a common scheme. Yuki's voice cuts through the chaos, explaining that the most dangerous traps are always placed near important items. The horrifying truth of his words dawns on the other maids. Kinko curses herself, realizing she should have remembered Yuki's warning from before. As the chaos settles, two maids begin to quietly discuss what to do about the situation. One asks what their plan is for Kokuto, but the other coldly states there's nothing they can do for her. The blonde maid insists they have to leave Kokuto behind, and the other grimly agrees since they can't bury her in the mansion. The blonde maid adds that while they could pray for Kokuto, she wouldn't recommend it. The keys that Kokuto dropped are quickly gathered from the floor. Now holding the keys, the blonde maid suggests they can probably use them to open the locked door. One of the maids declares that from this point forward, they're entering a cruel world with no time for prayers. Facing the grim reality of their situation, one maid turns and asks the others if they still have the will to continue. A voice explains that a live audience is watching them through cameras, placing bets on who will survive by enjoying the sight of cute girls in terror. The narration reveals the deaths are real, and part of a twisted show business that forces them into different outfits for games of escape or mutual slaughter. A voiceover confirms this is all just a twisted show business where the deaths are real, which is precisely why every player is a cute girl forced to either escape or kill each other. The horrifying realization hits one of the maids, who recoils in embarrassment at being watched. As another participant grimly accepts their lives are a spectacle, she comforts the embarrassed maid Momono, revealing she was kidnapped and vowing to get her home. Kinko announces her strategy is pure altruism, vowing to save as many people as possible, which leaves Momono stunned. Answering the question about their will to go on, Kinko powerfully declares to everyone that she is continuing. One maid reminds the group that if they don't escape, they won't get paid or be able to go home. Another declares she'll win the money to save her dad, while a third promises to help everyone in the game. When one maid says she volunteered, another's grim agreement that there's no point stopping makes the first realize she's participating against her will. As one of the maids calls out to Benia, another looks on completely flustered by the interaction. The maid with bangs covering her eyes panics internally, realizing she's the only one who hasn't resolved to continue. She reflects on how Kinko took the initiative despite being younger, while another maid's thoughts are cut short when she's startled by Aoi's sudden appearance. A blonde maid notices Kinko's hand is shaking and turns to the girl with bangs, asking what she plans to do. Realizing she isn't the only one who scared the maid with bangs, declares she'll do her best, just like Kinko. As the maids approach the locked door, one of them warns the group to stay back and keep low, anticipating another trap. After cycling through the massive keyring and several failed attempts, one maid finally finds the correct key and announces the door is open. The door opens into a hexagonal room, and one maid immediately takes note of the 6 levers lining the walls. While the other maids hesitate, a lone figure steps into the room as Benia silently watches her pass. Benia is stunned to see it's Aoi just as another maid signals from the doorway that it's safe to enter. One of the maids tries the door they just came through, but it's completely sealed shut. A blonde maid with glasses realizes they're locked in, announcing they can't leave until they complete the room's task. The group's attention is drawn to a strange device on the floor and a mirror on the wall, as they wonder what's required of them. A diagram suggests they need to pull all 6 levers at once to proceed, and one of the maids agrees this must be the solution. Another maid asks for confirmation, wondering if all 6 levers truly have to be pulled at the exact same time. But a third maid immediately points out the fatal flaw in that plan. There are 6 levers, but only 5 of them in the room. The blonde maid declares the numbers aren't a problem, reasoning the game must have accounted for the fact that one of them is already dead. She lays out a plan to test the levers in sets of 5, assuming one is a fake, but another maid seems unsure about the idea. Asked what the levers might do, the blonde maid with glasses speculates it will trigger the start of another minigame. She theorizes the room could start flooding, forcing them to solve a puzzle before they all drown. As another possibility, the floor could open up, forcing them to cling to the levers to avoid falling into darkness. She concludes that the right choices will lead to their escape, but one wrong move could get them all wiped out. Kinko asks if everyone is ready, and begins the countdown from 3 as the other maids brace themselves for the consequences. The blonde maid suddenly calls the whole thing off, telling everyone to move on as she and 2 others turn to leave. Kinko finishes the countdown and all 5 maids pull their levers at the exact same time. But absolutely nothing happens, and one maid confirms her suspicion that they really do need 6 people, as a hand is shown mashing a next button on a device. The blonde maid starts to suggest they regroup, but trails off in confusion, as another asks if the lever pull was a total failure. Suddenly, the maids find their wrists locked in place, with one staring down in disbelief at her new handcuffs. A dark-haired maid suddenly screams that planks are erupting from the floor. The rising walls instantly partition the room, trapping each of the 5 maids in her own triangular cell. The blonde maid can only stare up in horror as a massive spiked press begins to descend right on top of her. The 5 maids can only stare up in horror as a massive fang-like trap begins to descend from the ceiling. The maids descend into a full-blown panic as the trap lowers with one screaming while another demands to know what the hell is happening. As a giant saw blade lowers, one maid screams for Yuki, but another calmly states she already knows the lever is the trigger for this trap. She quickly deduces that pulling up will tighten the cuff and sever her hand, while pushing down won't loosen it enough to escape. The blonde maid calmly resigns herself to being chopped to pieces, but her hope is renewed when she spots a keyhole on the cuff, realizing she has the keys to unlock it. She brandishes the massive key ring, but her hope quickly fades as she's faced with finding the right key among dozens. The blonde maid frantically jams key after key into the lock, knowing one of them has to be the right one. With a satisfying click, the cuff springs open, and she triumphantly raises her freed hand. As the saw blades above her grind to a halt, she realizes that unlocking the cuff has only disarmed her own trap. With the other 4 still in mortal danger, a frantic shout from another maid suddenly gives her an idea. She's found a tiny gap near the floor where the partitions meet in the center of the room. She yells out the plan shell, pass the keys through the gap so they can all unlock their cuffs and stop the blades. But as one of the maids reaches for the keys, the descending blades slice into her hand before she can grab them. The maid recoils in agony, her hand sliced open by the descending blades. As she pulls her bleeding hand away, the other maids desperately shove their own hands into the gap to get the keys. Their desperation turns into a chaotic mess of grabbing hands as one of them yells not to fight over it. The blonde maid who freed herself screams for the others to stop fighting, insisting they can all escape if they just work together. A hand snatches the keyring from the pile, and as Benia shouts that she's got them, Kinko stares at the hand that took them. Benia successfully unlocks her cuff, ready to pass the keys on, but she stops cold when she recognizes a voice from another cell. It's Momono crying, and Benia feels a pang of helplessness, knowing how scared she must be, with no way to reach her. But Benia's helplessness hardens into determination, as she declares there is something she can do for her. She reasons that since she has the keys, she should be able to pass them directly to Momono. Suddenly a voice questions why there are 4 hands reaching through the gap for the keys. One of the maids realizes Benia is already free, meaning she's deliberately keeping her hand in the pile. Another maid figures out the scheme. Benia is playing favorites and has just passed the keys directly to Momono. One maid concludes their chance of survival is now 0, realizing they wasted too much time fighting over the keys. The only question left in her mind is which one of them is going to die. The panic spreads as 2 maids wonder if Aoi or Kinko will be next, their thoughts consumed by who will get the key. Trapped in her cell, a blonde maid reaches for the keys, only to realize with horror that they're just out of her grasp. As the blades lower, sheer panic sets in as she realizes she'll die if she can't grab the keys in time. But in her struggle, a sudden idea strikes her. She might be able to use the very lever she's cuffed to. The blonde maid hesitates, realizing that if she takes the keys, she's condemning someone else to die in her place. But her survival instinct wins out, and she panics as she reaches for the keys, remembering how the blades already grazed her. Panic floods the blonde maid's mind as she questions why she didn't just grab the keys when she had the chance. With their time completely up, the remaining maids can only scream in terror as the blades descend. The massive saw blades were loudly continuing their slow and unstoppable descent. The trapped maids can only watch in horror, each reacting with shock, grim resignation, or stunned silence. Overwhelmed by terror, one of the blonde maids finally breaks, clutching her head and screaming. As one girl asks what just happened, another realizes with dawning horror that Kinko intentionally severed her own hand by forcing the lever all the way up. Kinko's desperate move triggers a massive explosion that completely obliterates one of the maids, as a horrified Aoi can only ask why. Another maid stares at the grisly scene in confusion, wondering aloud why it isn't red like she expected. A blonde maid explains it's a preservation treatment to reduce gore for the audience, which is why the victim simply turned into a pile of remains. She adds that all of them were subjected to this procedure while they were unconscious and being brought to the game. The blonde maid explains that a white substance present in Awa's blood from the start thickens on contact with air and instantly stops any bleeding. Another maid speculates they were injected with preservatives, meaning the bodies won't rot or even smell if they're left behind. One of the maids nearly collapses as the reality of the preservation treatment sinks in, but a sudden click from a nearby door snaps them all to attention. A maid announces that the door has unlocked, revealing a new path for them to escape the room. As one maid reels in shock from the gruesome death, Benia coldly tells everyone they need to get over it and keep moving. While Kinko trembles and mutters apologies for what she's done, Benia's true goal comes to light, securing her 28th consecutive win. Elsewhere, an official monitoring the game confirms to the other observers that 2 participants have now been eliminated. Back with the survivors, one of the blonde maids suggests that surely the most difficult part of the game is over. She points out the average survival rate is 70, and with 2 people already gone, their odds are looking much better. The blonde maid then turns to Kinko, who's still standing over the remains of the girl she just killed. She tries to reassure Kinko, telling her not to worry about her severed hand. The blonde maid reveals the game has complete medical support, meaning the preservation treatment will allow for Kinko's hand and even organs to be fully restored once it's all over. The survivors push forward into the next room, where they're faced with a choice between a glass-walled sauna and an old elevator. One of the maids sizes up their options, identifying the elevator and what she calls a menacing sauna. They quickly discover the elevator is a one-time ride with a 150 kilograms weight limit, a plan that's instantly shut down since their combined weight is far too much. One of the maids does some quick mental math, figuring they each weigh about 50 kilograms. That puts their combined total at 200 kilograms, blowing past the elevator's weight capacity. The grim realization hits them to stay under the 150 kilogram limit. Only 3 of them can go. One of the maids concludes they have to leave someone behind, as a case of large weapons gleams on the wall. Another maid is horrified, asking if they really have to abandon one of their own. Before a decision can be made, Kinko suddenly volunteers to stay behind, causing another maid to stumble forward in shock as the others tell her not to jump to conclusions. One of the maids turns back, demanding to know what Kinko is doing. Before anyone can react, Kinko slams the elevator button, tearfully telling the other 3 to go on without her as the doors slide shut. The maids left behind are stunned by Kinko's sacrifice, with 2 rushing the closing doors and demanding to know what's going on. From inside the elevator, Kinko tearfully confesses that this is all her fault. She clarifies that she feels responsible because Aoi is now dead. Alone in the elevator, Kinko sobs that since Aoi is dead, she must die as well. She resolves that the only way to atone for what she's done is with her own life. Outside, the other 3 maids discover they're trapped when they find the elevator doors are locked from the inside. One of the maids pounds on the elevator door, screaming at Kinko to come out and calling her an idiot. Realizing it's no use, she looks for something to break the glass panel on the door. Another maid calls out to Momono but freezes when she sees a hand suddenly appear holding a sharp weapon. One of the maids begins to speak but clearly hesitates. She then bluntly asks what the problem is, arguing that if Kinko wants to die, they should just let her. The maid doubles down, insisting it's fine and that the 3 of them should just leave. The blonde maid realizes that's what they're all thinking. She whirls on the other maid, who just dismisses the situation with a resigned, "Oh well." The blonde maid calls the other's resigned attitude cute, leaving her completely baffled by the comment. She then gets close to Momono, whispering for her to consider what will happen if Kinko dies, and Momono reels in shock at the implication. The blonde maid explains that if Kinko dies, the game is automatically over for all of them, as they'll fall below the minimum number of required players. As the other maid finally understands the implication and glances at the weapon case, the blonde maid ignores her outburst and calmly approaches a dresser. With a tool in hand, the blonde maid shatters the elevator's glass window, prompting a simple okay from Kinko inside. Kinko glares back through the broken pane now, holding a weapon and demanding to know why they didn't just leave her behind. Seeing her friend armed and hostile, the blonde maid cries out in alarm. Oh no! The blonde maid reaches through the broken glass to hit the button, but stumbles back as her tool shatters and Kinko screams for them to leave her alone to die. The blonde maid steps into the elevator and pulls Kinko into a tight embrace, telling her she's not alone. The sudden kindness is too much for Kinko, who completely breaks down into heaving sobs. Her weapon slips from her grasp and clatters to the floor as she tearfully asks why they're helping her. The blonde maid reminds Kinko of her promise to clear the game with as many of them as possible. She reveals she needs the prize money to get her father out of debt, causing a tearful Kinko to whisper the word father. The word father plunges Kinko into a memory of a child crying out for their dad, while being held by a woman. As Kinko reels from the memory, the blonde maid looks on with quiet resolve. Momono asks what they should do now, and Benya turns to the blonde maid, who confirms from the elevator that she has a plan. From inside the elevator, the blonde maid declares they're all leaving together a plan that leaves Benya completely baffled. The blonde maid then announces she needs the sharpest weapon possible, pulling a katana from the wall rack. The blonde maid reveals the katana is for amputating their own bodies, leaving Momono horrified, while Benya immediately dismisses the plan as an exceptional freak show. The blonde maid explains that even ignoring Kinko, the 150 kilograms limit means they need to be 50 kilograms each, before singling out Benya and Momono as the real problem. She calls out Benya for being around 180 centimeters tall, explaining that their incredible reach back in the hexagonal room was a dead giveaway. The blonde maid explains that even without Kinko, they're still over the weight limit, telling one of the others her voluptuous body is the problem. She reveals her horrifying plan. They'll each amputate a leg to lose 20 of their weight, then use the sauna to sweat off the final 5. Momono and Benya desperately ask if she's joking, but the blonde maid confirms she is absolutely serious and asks if they agree to the plan. The blonde maid promises she can sever any part in a single clean strike with the katana. As she explains their limbs can be reattached later, a horrified Momono screams that it's insane and begs Benya for help. The blonde maid reveals her own limbs have been reattached multiple times and demands a decision, causing Momono to scream in pure terror. The pink-haired maid panics with the weapon in hand, desperately asking why she has to be the one to do it. Sitting on the floor, Yuki calmly states she can't cut off her own leg and orders the other maid to do it for her. It dawns on another maid that Yuki's plan was always to use the sauna after the amputations, explaining why she forced Kinko out of it earlier. While embracing the terrified maid, Yuki warns her that Kinko's death means her own privately admiring Kinko for acting like a hero. Yuki then lunges at the screaming maid, silently branding her as savage, cruel, and deviant. The maids grimly follow through with the amputation plan, and after the bloody ordeal, they sit in silence as a cursor highlights one of the survivors. The focus shifts to the fine details of one maid's uniform, specifically a large bow adorned with a white rose. With the amputations finally complete, one of the maids announces it's time for the 4 of them to move forward. The 4 maids pile into the elevator, shocked when it suddenly lurches upwards. The doors open to reveal a stark white room, their discarded weapons lying on the floor, as one maid turns to another and lets out a dry chuckle. The maid's dry chuckle explodes into hysterical laughter, and soon the other 3 join in, overwhelmed by a mix of pain and relief. The laughter is unhinged, revealing the immense psychological toll of what they've just survived. As the laughter fades, Yuki asks Kinko what she'll do first when she gets home, but Kinko just sits quietly with a faint smile, the amputation katana resting beside her. As Yuki starts talking about her personal plans, the other blonde maid is distracted by the sound of a nearby gate opening. Kinko calls Yuki carefree, but she insists her piling garbage is a serious issue, and the pigtail maid agrees. The pigtail maid asks Kinko for her plans, and Yuki explains her job makes her lose track of the days, asking if tomorrow is Friday. The pigtail maid says she'll first pay back her father's debt, but trails off, admitting she has no idea what comes after that. Nearby, another maid tells Momono that being mean gives people depth, while the pigtail maid turns to Kinko and tells her to be more selfish. Kinko quietly considers the advice to be selfish, while the pigtail maid vows to do her best once she makes it home alive. She finishes her thought, resolving to try and be more selfish herself. Suddenly, another maid spots the exit, prompting Yuki to tell them to go, and the pigtail maid immediately agrees. The pigtail maid reports that the exit door is locked, and a nearby sign indicates that 2 people cannot pass. The blonde maid realizes only 3 of them can proceed, and as another girl starts to argue, the pigtail maid cries out in frustration. Without warning, Yuki smashes the pigtail maid in the face with her katana hilt, and as the girl hits the floor in shock, Yuki tells Kinko she's suspicious because everyone else is a beginner. As Yuki stands over Kinko with her katana, a graphic appears confirming that 3 people must be eliminated to proceed. She looks up with a cold expression, completely unfazed by her sudden act of violence. Yuki then looks up towards the sky, her long hair blowing in the wind as she firms her resolve. Yuki squints into a blinding light, commenting on its intensity. She casually explains that the survival rate for this game is normally around 70%. She then drops a bombshell that horrifies the others. The rate is way lower for beginners. One of the maids looks down at the fallen girl, observing that there's now one more dead body. Yuki stands over the body with her katana, declaring this outcome is totally in line with that expectation. Kinko is completely stunned by the sudden brutal attack. The pigtail maid lies motionless on the floor, taken out in a single blow. Yuki glances back with a dead calm expression, offering a single chilling word of apology. Yuki rationalizes that she never actually deceived Kinko. She was just the closest person, and the game demanded another death regardless. In a bathroom, a blonde girl ties up her hair, admiring her reflection while checking a mark on her body with a screen. Another girl touches the spot on her back, and they both confirm the wound has healed perfectly. The blonde girl opens a closet, discovering it's filled with identical outfits. The other girl watches her from across the room. The blonde girl pulls out a maid uniform and holds it up against her friend. The Naya quietly reflects that she has finally reached her goal. This victory marks her 28th consecutive win. Her celebration is cut short when a woman in a bunny outfit calls out for her master, causing Benia to react. Back in her apartment, Yuki reflects on the horrors she just survived, admitting that despite everything, she's still absolutely devastated that she missed Garbage Day. The scene cuts to a recorded conversation from some time in the past. A woman in a hat declares her goal is to achieve 99 consecutive wins. Her companion is stunned by this ambition and immediately asks why. Her companion calls her a weird girl as they ride together in a wooden cart. The blonde woman lies back in the cart, but a sudden flash of light erupts nearby. Yuki jolts awake in her trash-filled apartment, realizing the entire ordeal was just a dream. Her first thought is that the 9th game was without a doubt the absolute worst. Her phone reads 2:07 a.m. as she mutters to herself that she's hungry. Yuki walks down the street, enjoying a late-night ice cream bar. As she pauses on a street corner, a car pulls up and a woman with short hair and glasses opens the passenger door. Addressing her as agent, the woman apologizes for the late hour and invites Yuki to participate in an event called Candlewoods, asking if she's ready. Yuki tells the woman to take her there immediately, and the agent confirms she's ready. In the next instant, Yuki hits the ground wearing a bunny outfit and lets out a sharp gasp. Yuki is immediately disgusted by her new embarrassing bunny outfit. She groans that this is worse than being naked, recalling that even the school swimsuit from 3 games ago was less humiliating. Yuki is stunned to find herself in a massive field packed with hundreds of other people, all forced into the same ridiculous bunny costume. As she tries to process the situation, another girl cheerfully wishes her a good morning, getting only a dazed "ah" in response. A new player, Hakushi, calls out to her master. Hakushi immediately tells Yuki the bunny outfit doesn't suit her at all. Yuki retorts that the same could be said for Hakushi. Hakushi scolds her for not tracking her record, and Yuki casually estimates she's played less than 10 games over the last 3 months. Hakushi asks if Yuki has already hit 99 wins, but Yuki clarifies she's only at 96, remembering another girl who claimed the pool game was her last. In Yuki's memory, the girl explains that 99 wins is her ultimate goal, so she has to be extremely careful. The girl elaborates that she can't rest in peace without proper preparation, which confuses Hakushi, but Yuki simply says she understands. They've just beaten up and destroyed a creature called the Explainer, a move that's immediately called out as bold. Hakushi explains that unlike a wolf or turtle, a tanuki is fair game, though their search for an item inside it came up empty. She justifies the act by citing an old folktale where a rabbit kills a tanuki, prompting Yuki to call her uneducated. Hakushi asks what kind of game they're playing this time. She explains that, to put it simply, the game is just hide and seek. Hakushi explains that the players designated as rabbits simply have to survive for 1 week to clear the game. Meanwhile, the seekers called stumps must each kill 5 rabbits within that same time limit to win. To make things interesting, the stumps will also be provided with an arsenal of deadly equipment. Yuki spots the clock and figures the game starts in 6 hours, but Hakushi questions how non-living stumps are supposed to kill them. Hakushi can't even see the clock through the massive crowd, prompting another girl to wonder just how many people are participating. The staggering scale of the game is revealed. 300 players are designated as rabbits and 30 are stump. Another girl is stunned, admitting this is the biggest game she's ever been in. Yuki assumes most of the massive crowd must be beginners, but immediately dismisses her own theory as incorrect. Yuki comments that she recognizes most of the faces, but another player points out that only a specific group of about 30 are actually newcomers. One girl is stunned to learn there are over 200 regular players, while her friend admits she's never considered the implication. The revelation leaves another girl in disbelief, asking if that number can possibly be real. Yuki scoffs that there are so many fools risking their lives for a few million yen, but Hakushi retorts that she's one to talk. Hakushi explains the games attract all sorts thrill seekers, the suicidal and even murderers who enjoy killing legally. She adds that some people continue playing for no reason at all, then trails off hinting that what she's about to say next is unbelievable. Hakushi looks straight at Yuki, telling her she's one of those people who plays for no reason at all. Hakushi admits she doesn't understand her, and Yuki points out there isn't even a trophy or extra money on the line for 99 wins. Hakushi agrees but clarifies that the achievement would set a new record. Hakushi clarifies the current record is only 98 wins, so Yuki points out there's no guarantee 99 would even be a new one. Yuki asks how she can possibly cling to such a flimsy goal. With a simple smile, Hakushi replies that she just wants a goal. Hakushi smiles, telling Yuki she'll eventually understand the need for a goal, but Yuki just thinks she's a total weirdo. Yuki dismisses this, saying that just putting her life on the line is enough, but Hakushi laments that by that logic she's not a very good disciple. Yuki bluntly tells Hakushi she's lacking charm, prompting Hakushi to reflect that unlike her own aimless existence, Yuki is different. Finishing her thought, Hakushi admits that Yuki is far more respectable. Hakushi simply agrees with Yuki's harsh assessment of her character. Suddenly, a voice from the nearby forest calls out to them. Ignoring the interruption, Yuki declares that it's time to talk about the game. Hakushi explains the game is hide and seek, with a 1-week time limit, but warns it's unrealistic for all the rabbits to escape the stumps. She breaks down the grim math if each of the 30 stumps kills their quota of 5. Exactly half of the 300 rabbits will be eliminated. Given those odds, Hakushi concludes they must abandon hiding and go on the offensive. Hakushi proposes a new strategy. The rabbits will steal the stumps' weapons and then hunt them down. Her logic is simple. The more stumps they kill, the fewer predators there will be to threaten them. In fact, she believes if they eliminate every stump, it's theoretically possible for all the rabbits to survive. As the pigtail maid sleeps peacefully in another location, the newcomer raises her fist and officially declares the start of the cute bunny counterattack. With Yuki watching, Hakushi throws her arm in the air, officially declaring the start of the cute bunny counterattack. Another girl on the ground joins the rally, vowing that they will strike back at the stumps. In a past memory, a woman declares she'll risk her life to fulfill her wish of becoming a disciple and growing strong. Stunned by this conviction, Hakushi kneels before her, exclaiming that she thinks the woman is amazing. In the memory, Hakushi stares in awe at a battlefield of corpses, exclaiming she can't believe how many the woman killed. She begs to be allowed to stay and learn from her, but the woman simply begins to say In the memory, Hakushi finishes her thought, declaring that she wants to be just like her. The moment shatters as the woman looks down at Hakushi on the ground, causing the others to recoil in shock. In a different location, a girl named Moselle introduces herself to a new group as another participant notes. There are around 30 of them, and wonders what the game is this time. One of the other girls looks on with a completely confused expression. A voice from a large tree announces it will now explain the rules, as a second voice simply says the word stumps. A talking tree informs the stumps that their game is hide and seek, and when the 6-minute countdown hits 0, their hunt for the 300 rabbits begins. To survive the week-long game, each stump must kill 5 bunnies, or an internal device will execute them for failing their quota. To aid in their hunt, the tree reveals that an arsenal of handguns will be provided to every stump. The tree's voice elaborates that the weapons come in 3 types, with 10 of each available for the stumps. These weapons are the pine cone smoke grenade, the bamboo leaf 15 centimeters knife, and the Morning Glory 8-shot, non-reloadable handgun. Moselle cuts in with an excuse me as she realizes with dawning horror that this game is going to involve real combat. One of the girls asks Moselle how she can remain so calm, while another admits she doesn't understand what's happening. Moselle is completely thrown by their questions, stammering in confusion. She asks if this is everyone's first time, her voice trailing off as a horrifying realization dawns on her. Moselle asks if they're all really first-timers, unable to believe they have 0 experience in these games. Her worst fears are confirmed as she realizes she's the only veteran on a team of complete amateurs. She instantly recognizes that their inexperience puts the entire team at a massive disadvantage. She realizes she can't abandon her team, understanding the 300 rabbits won't just hide, but will actively hunt them down. Moselle resolves to become their leader, knowing their only path to survival is to learn how to kill without hesitation. But her resolve is immediately shattered by self-doubt as she questions if she even has what it takes to lead them. A memory surfaces of her telling a young girl Shell teach her how to kill, placing a knife in her hand, before screaming at that same girl Moeg to stop. The command to stab her echoes as the memory ends, with the girl on the floor, a hand reaching down to her. The memory reveals the lesson's bloody aftermath, with a woman lying dead on the floor. Another woman embraces the young Moe, calling her a good girl, as a bloodied knife rests nearby. Snapping back to the present, Moselle raises her handgun with intense resolve, the name Moege echoing in her mind. Moselle immediately shoots one of the girls in her group, who cries out in pain and utter disbelief. As the girl Moselle shot collapses to the ground bleeding, another screams in terror. Moselle stares ahead with cold determination while the rest of her group looks on in absolute horror. Elsewhere, a digital clock confirms the game will begin in exactly 6 hours. With the body still warm on the floor, Moselle informs the others that they're out of time and it's time to practice. She clarifies their practice is on how to kill people, and it begins immediately. Moselle then orders the horrified girls to pick up the bamboo leaves, the knives now sticking out of the floor. Moselle orders the girls to stab their fallen teammate, warning them to comply if they don't want to get shot too. She then lays out the grim quota: 2 stabs per person, deep enough to bury the blade's center, and aimed at a vital point before picking one girl to go first. The girl chosen to go first collapses, unable to bring herself to stab the corpse, as Moselle coldly calls her hesitation a problem. Elsewhere, another participant lays out the brutal stakes of the game: kill the stumps or be killed by them. Moselle grabs the girl who failed and holds a knife to her, warning that such weakness will get their entire team killed. Moselle forces the knife on the girl, insisting she must be able to use it. She asks if the girl is really incapable of following her order. As the girl trembles, Moselle simply says she understands and calls it a pity. The countdown continues as a digital clock strikes 545. Moselle slashes the girl who hesitated, telling her through her screams of pain that the attack was only a warning. She declares that anyone who can't follow her orders will die, then points to the next girl in line, telling her she's next. Moselle tells the terrified girl she doesn't care which of her 2 teammates she stabs, but she must choose one. She lays out the options: roll on the floor, crying like a baby, or use the knife on the ground to stay alive. As Moselle cocks her handgun and begins a 3-second countdown, the girl finally breaks kneeling to pick up the knife. The girl drives the knife into her teammate, and as she stands panting in horror, Moselle coldly tells her to do it again, this time aiming for the heart. Following Moselle's command, she drives the knife into her teammate's chest a second time. Moselle orders the knife passed to the next participant, who calmly states that it's fine. With a menacing glare, he declares that anyone who can't follow his orders will die, leaving the next girl frozen in terror as she holds the bloody weapon. With 3 bodies now lying at his feet, Moselle breathes heavily and announces that everyone is done. He looks over the bodies of his former teammates, still catching his breath from the slaughter. He grimly concludes that in the end he was forced to kill 3 of them himself. His mind flashes back to his childhood, certain that if a certain person were here, she would do the exact same thing. As a little girl, he holds hands with the woman he admires, vowing to become just like her, no matter the cost. As the game clock strikes 0, Moselle decides to be reborn as a new person, while elsewhere a group of rabbits prepares for the start. He vows to rise from the dead over and over again until he finally reaches the level of the woman he admires,